How's it going, guys? What are you doing? And welcome to a brand new video tutorial from Udemy. Today we're going to take a look on Sequelize and how you can use this awesome ORM for creating your own database schemas, models, and interacting with the whole database systems. What is Sequelize? Sequelize is basically an ORM, is an object relational mapping. So it actually allows you to interact with multiple databases, and clearly in here it supports Postgres, MySQL, SQLite, MS SQL, and anything actually works with the SQL. So it has that pretty much support. Most of the people works with MySQL, as I do in here. So it adds all the support all in one single objects relational mapping library in here. So it's actually more like a framework that allows you to work with databases. You can actually connect to your database very easily without any problems, and you define your schemas, as you can probably in here, or you define your models to be better say. You give it your schema like a username, whatever thing it is, like a string and a date, and you can easily convert between all of the systems. Let's say you're working right now using MySQL, and for some reason your application, your software needs to like pivot and change it to completely something different, like to choose a local offline storage, for example, like SQLite. So you can easily do it without changing any line of code. You only just go ahead and change the delegate in here. You change your password and username and whatever information concerning your database system, and there we go. Everything's gonna be working, pretty much work for you fine. Some of you might ask, why would I work with Sequelize and choose Sequelize rather than like other frameworks or other ORMs available out there? And the other thing, why I don't just go with a basic MySQL setup, like using normal queries and creating my normal tables, like I would define them in queries and create them and all different basic things that you would probably do when interacting with a SQL database. So first things first, an ORM gives you an awesome API to work with, so you're not going to be bored or you're not going to feel a little bit outdated using this API. The second thing is it provides you with a tool set and a rich API functions and methods behind the scenes that allows you actually to interact with databases as you're not exactly doing any queries. So you don't really have to care about queries, like type your queries, like select users or everything, username, ID and stuff from the user, for example, like to grab the data from the table and so on and so forth. You don't really have to care about any of that queries. You just, like, for example, you define that and you can just go ahead and do like user create this one. It's just gonna create it and save it in a database for you and so on and so forth. But the third things needs to be done. So let's just go ahead and jump into our projects in here. And here we've got a normal or simple Node.js project. It's super simple. It doesn't have anything really complicated or anything in here. Just like we've got everything in here, and you can just go ahead and add an src folder. So an src folder for print all of our source files, and an up.js. What does the up.js does is basically just run the express server for us. So simple enough, nothing really complicated or anything. If you don't know any of that, you can just go ahead and watch my Node.js course series. So let's just go ahead and jump right now to install Sequelize. So you need to install Sequelize in your projects in order to work pretty much fine. So just type in Sequelize, and that pretty much it. So just go ahead and install it and save it as a dependency. It's going to be installed and everything working pretty much fine. The other thing you need to install is actually the the daemon server, or the actual client adapter that binds with the SQL. So let's say, for example, in our case, in our tutorial, we're going to work with MySQL. So we need to install MySQL specific adapter that works with Sequelize and pretty much can connect to the database as a normal client. So we need the MySQL version 2, not version 1, because the version 1 is outdated and it doesn't work pretty much very well. So you need to select and choose the second version, and you can go ahead and easily install it. So just save it that as well as a dependency, and there we go. You can just go and choose that Postgres or whatever system you're using, and you can install this for it. The other thing we're going to use is actually the command line interface, or the CLI from Sequelize. So you just type in Sequelize-CLI and make sure this one is actually going to be saved as a global, so -G, and it's going to be saved globally. So wherever you actually are, you can access it and you can run the script without any problems. We're going to use this CLI to do migrations and connects to the database and interacts with it and stuff like this. So this is all you pretty much need to do with Sequelize. The other thing you probably need to do, most of you must have done and know about this, is actually running the daemon server of MySQL. So this needs to be running, otherwise it will fail And there we go. So everything is working pretty much fine. Let's go and try now to start our application. And first things first, let's start by setting up the Sequelize or using the Sequelize CLI. So I'm just going to do Sequelize. Actually, you install it using Sequelize CLI command from npm, but the name is actually completely different when you try to use it. So just Sequelize. And here, if you just type in that, you're going to give you a list of commands, list of available commands, and clearly seen here. So you can do a database migration, you can create a migration, initialize and stuff like this. So first things first, what we need is just to actually initialize our project. Since it's like a brand new project, we don't really need to do anything rather than just initialization. So just type in Sequelize initialize and make sure you are inside of the projects. And a lot of things are going to be initialized. So you're going to have a models folder, you're going to have a migrations folder, and you're going to have a new config folder. So this config folder represents all the configuration representing your database in 3 stages, like development, testing, and production. We're going to just probably use development because we are inside of the development stage in here. The other thing in here, we've got models, and it has a pretty self-explanatory model code already being put for you. You don't really need to use this necessarily. You can just go ahead and put that, which we are going to do, and I'm going to just go ahead and delete it. But you can keep this and use it. It's going to work pretty much fine for you. But I just want to show you everything from the ground up and how to work with the Sequelize and learn it in one single video. So after watching this video, hopefully you can go ahead and pick up your project and work with Sequelize without any problems, putting your models together, your migrations and schemas, and trying to use the API with eager layouting. We're going to see all of this inside of this video. So hopefully you like it, guys. And I'm just going to try to start in here. And let me just put the first file, which is going to be the Bootstrap. So this file is going to be representing, or pretty much is going to take care of bootstrapping and actually initializing the application. So this is all it's going to pretty much be doing. We're going to have another folder, it's going to be the models, and we're going to put the models inside of the src because it's a little bit much more convenient to work with models. That's why I'm putting it inside of here. And yeah, so this is pretty much what we need for now. And we're going to start off by putting also another folder, and it's going to be a database folder. So I'm going to just name this database, and inside of this database I'm going to name it connection. Again, this is just my optional thing, so I like to organize my files and my projects structure as it is, like you can clearly see in here. Of course, everyone has his own opinion, everyone has his own preferred project structure, so you probably have much better project structure than I do in here. So you can just go ahead and put that in the comments. Of course, I'll be very happy to know about this, or you can just go ahead and put it in your projects and be very happy about it without any problems. So this is going to be actually be able to connect to the database and open up the connection between Sequelize and the actual daemon server that is running on our local machine. And first things first, let's just go ahead and do Sequelize in here, and we're going to just go ahead and import it or require it pretty much. So I'm going to just go ahead and require Sequelize. And now we need actually to open up the actual connection. So I'm going to say Sequelize, and this is going to be representing the actual instance of our Sequelize. So this is actually the actual framework, the main framework library, and here we've got the Sequelize. So this is the main entry points, and this is our instance of the connection to the database. And I'm going to create a new instance in here. So I'm going to say new, and it's going to take a Sequelize, and this is actually a constructor taking a couple of parameters first. First, we give it our database. So for example, it's gonna be, we're gonna name our database, let's say it's gonna be I don't know, social network. All right, so we're gonna just create a social network database or small Twitter clone thing on our here. And the second thing it takes is pretty much the username. So we're gonna be root. In our case, in my case, pretty much is gonna be root. The password is gonna be empty, so I'm just gonna leave this empty. And there's a couple of options that you can put, like a host, which host is actually running on, and you can give it 127.0.0.1, which pretty much represents a local host. So you can just put a local host in here, and you've got a delegate. What do you mean by a delegate is which system you are going to interact with. So MySQL, PostgreSQL, or Sequelize, or whatever. In our case, I'm going to just use MySQL, of course. And you can just go in and disable this, of course, like operators, aliases, and you just set false because it is deprecated and it's going to be removed in the next version major release. So make sure to do this really quick, and everything's going to be pretty much working fine. Simple enough. Now we need to just go and export this as a default. So I'm gonna say Sequelize in here, simple. So I'm just gonna, simple exporting in here. Also, what we also need is, this is actually a dependence file. So it's gonna be like called, for example, it's have the app.js in here. So we're gonna require it, and it's gonna have this initialization and connection. It's gonna connect without any problems. But later on, we're gonna need this instance, the Sequelize instance that is being returned from the connection constructor itself. We're gonna need this to create modules, to actually interact with the database, like save on the database and insert and fetch data from it. So we need this to act as a global variable. So we don't really need to, every time, to require this over and over again. We can just go in and export it as a global variable. Again, global variables on Node.js aren't really good, but in our case scenario are better than just go ahead and requiring it every single time, and so on and so forth. So you can find a better architecture for running on your application. There's a framework, some boiler palettes specifically made for this, but I'm just gonna work with global variables. I'm just gonna say global, the main global variable. I'm gonna set Sequelize on it, and it's gonna equal our Sequelize instance in here. Really simple, nothing really complicated or anything. Simple enough. So we're just gonna save this, and it's gonna have this one. We're gonna just jump into the app.js in here, and let's say I'm just gonna be putting inside of here, so db connection. So I'm just gonna put the connection in here, and I'm gonna require it. This is all I'm probably gonna need, and it's gonna need to go to inside of src database and connection. Simple enough. So it's gonna like actually require it, connect to the database, and export this to the global variable. Now, since we have connected and everything is working pretty much fine, there's one thing is actually missing. We haven't created the database yet, which we need to go ahead and create this database. So let me just go ahead and use the MySQL CLI or command line interface to actually interact with the database itself. I'm just gonna say the username is gonna be root and the password is actually empty. So leave it as this, and I'm gonna create a database. So I'm just gonna execute a command really quick. So create database, and we name it the same as we named our database. So it's gonna be social network, and yeah, there we go. Now we've created a database and everything is working pretty much fine. We can just go ahead now and create our first model. So we're gonna go inside models and create our first model. Since we're gonna create a social network, and as I've said, I'm gonna create something like a Twitter clone. So a simple model will be, the first simple model is gonna be actually a tweet that represents a single tweet being tweeted by a single user, of course. And I'm gonna create that. So we're gonna say tweets, and my naming convention for modules or models in pretty much in an like API or an MVC architecture is actually just putting the first one as a capital letter, so to make it look a little bit like a model and something special or something. So yeah, you can just gonna use your own convention without any problems. Yeah, there we go. And here I'm just gonna require the framework itself, because it has kind of types and stuff that we need. And I'm just gonna say require Sequelize once again, and I'm gonna export. So I'm gonna do module exports, and here we need to define our schema. So for defining schema, we need the actual instance, the instance that we have just exported as a global variable. Remember that inside of the connection we did global Sequelize, and we exported this as a Sequelize. So now we can either access it through the actual global objects, which is pretty boring, and we can just go ahead and do it directly, because now it is an actual global variable. We don't really need to use any other reference to it, just the name of it, and there we go. So not a capital letter, because the instance is just like with a lowercase s, and everything worked pretty much fine. So we need to go ahead and do a define, and define is actually a method. It takes first the name of the model that you want to create. In this case, it's going to be tweets, and the other thing is actually the constructor, or pretty much the schema that you want to assign into this particular model. What I mean by schema is basically what you actually see as tables or columns inside of the table. So this one is going to be the actual table, which gonna work with Sequelize, and Sequelize is gonna name this by default by adding an s to make it plural. Like you put your model name as a tweet, and later on when you actually migrate that and stuff So we're gonna just name this tweets with an S at the end to make it look like a plural, since we're gonna have multiple records inside of this particular table. So this represents a table, and all the schema attributes inside of here are gonna represent each column assigned to this particular table. So for this one, let's go and try, let me see. So for the tweets, it has to be really simple, but we can put first, the author is going to be like an association between the tweets, and I'm going to create another model. So for now, I'm just going to have a content of the tweets. So the tweet's going to have pretty much a content, and we can go in and use Sequelize, and this is the main part. So from Sequelize, or through the Sequelize main export in here, you access which type you want, like a text, a time, integer or something. We just want a string, and here if you just try to put this as a function constructor, you can put in some parameters. So the parameters, one of the main parameters is actually the length of the string you want. For example, we want a string about I don't know, the actual 300 characters at max. So Twitter, for example, I don't know how much Twitter actually the limitation of characters, but let's go and try to put 300 for now without any problems. And the first thing that we all actually forgot about is the main ID that I'm going to identify each row alone. So we're going to have that as an ID. So it's going to be ID. You can either put it as an object in here, or you can just directly put the type. So I better put the objects in here. I'm going to say type equals Sequelize dot string, or pretty much this is not a string, it's going to be an integer. So an integer with 11. This is actually a standard thing for the IDs. We're going to have allow null to be set to false, so there will be no null inside of the IDs, and auto increment is going to be set to true, and primary key also is going to be set to true. So this is going to represent our primary key, and it's going to be auto incrementing whenever a new value is going to be stored inside of this table. Simple enough. So let me just put that in here, and that's all pretty much we need to add for the tweet. So we just need to make it very simple, very straightforward, without any complicated things or stuff like running on behind the scenes. So remember, we've added a tweet in here, but we haven't added any migration yet. What I mean by migrations, for some of you if it doesn't know what are migrations, are basically a piece of like tasks that runs and creates the structure of your table inside of your database system. So this is all it basically is. This model is going to represent it, and it's going to actually be able to insert the data inside of the table. But if you don't have the table, you won't be able to insert the data, the model data inside of it. So first you need to create a migration that is responsible for creating a single table with its columns on the database. Then later on you can go and increase that. So let me just go and copy this attributes, because it's pretty much copy pasting, and I'm going to use now time to use actually the CLI. So I'm going to say Sequelize, and I'm going to do a DB or just like migration, and I'm going to create a new migration. So this is pretty much all you need, and you can give it a name attribute. It's actually required. So a name attribute is actually what you want to name your migrations. For the naming convention for migrations, a lot of people actually love and use is actually you make it like a verb or like a to-do thing. So what each migration is going to pretty much do, for example, is going to create tweets table. So this is how you want to name your migrations to make it straightforward for anybody actually reads your code. Going to be very easy to identify which each migration is actually doing. So running this command is going to pretty much go inside of the migrations folder, and going to be creating that. So you can clearly see new migrations with a timestamp in here. If you open up this, you're going to find two methods. One is down and the other one is up. So what does the up does is when you run the migration and the table structure hasn't been migrated yet, it's just going to go ahead, grab these migrations or grab the attribute you put inside of this up, and it's going to submit it to the database. If you try to undo or roll back your migrations, what's going to happen, the down method is going to run in here, and it's going to, for example, drop the table users or drop any other table you specify in here. So let me just get rid of that and get rid of that comment here. It's just like for self-explanatory. And I'm just going to use the query interface now. So the query interface allows you to create tables, columns, and interacting with the database itself. So I'm going to do create table. And the create table, what it does, it takes first the table names to clearly see in here. So what is the table name? I'm going to name it tweets. The second thing, it takes the actual schema. I'm just going to paste in the schema with an ID, the content, and there's one more other thing very importantly, that's actually Sequelize. When you try to insert any document into it, it's going to be automatically assigning two attributes. One is actually created at, and the other one is updated at. So whenever you create something, it's going to put the date and time inside of that attribute, and whenever you update the particular record, it's going to update the updated time or updated at attribute inside of it. So I'm going to put that 2 in here. So created at, and it's going to represent a Sequelize dot date, and the same thing goes for the updated at. So Sequelize dot date again, but we still haven't got Sequelize in here, so I'm just going to require it really quick. Or yeah, we've got that, so yeah, we don't really need it anyway. So yeah, I made a mistake in here, and pretty much all we need in here. Very simple, very straightforward, nothing really complicated. In the down, what we want is to get rid of the table, so we're gonna call create interface dot drop table, and for dropping table, we're just gonna give it the table name that you want to drop, and which is tweets. The same thing that we've put it up there, and that pretty much all is gonna be doing in here. Simple enough. Now, if you try to run your migrations, how you can do is you run Sequelize throughout the CLI, you do db migrate. So this is basically all you need to do for running a single migration that is newly created inside of the migrations folder. And just run this command. Yeah, here it tells us like known development database because we haven't updated the config.json, which you probably need to do. So I'm just going to update this really quick. So social network, and it's going to be root, the password is null, and the delegate is MySQL. You can also update this for the production if you're willing to release this, but for now it's enough for us. So I'm just going to run this again, the migration, and it should migrate. So yeah, I think I've got an error in migration. Yeah, I completely messed up, so I need to return a promise because this is actually going to return a promise, and this up method expects you to return a promise. So just return this. Also make sure to return this, otherwise it going to gives you this really weird error. And running the migrations for the last time right now, and then we can just go ahead and take a look on that. So now as you can clearly see, the created tweets table migration has been run successfully. We can go ahead and do describe and tweets. Run this. Let me just first select a database, which is going to be social network. Okay. Using a database, and then we can actually describe the tweets. And there we go. We've got created at, the contents, the ID, and this is our table. So describing is just basically telling what is the structure of your table. Simple enough. Now we've created the tweets. We have got another model to be created, which is going to be pretty much the same. So I'm just going to be copy pasting in, and it's going to be the user. So a user going to have a single or pretty much multiple tweets to be put on tweets on his account. But each tweet is going to be belonging to a single user and a single user only. I can't have a tweet that belongs to multiple users or something like 2 or 3 users. That's completely not how it works. So you need to understand how your system works in order to be able to do this kind of things and set the database architecture of it. I'm gonna have it user.js. You can name this author because it's the same thing for putting a tweet as an author and stuff, but it doesn't really matter that much. I'm gonna name this to a user. It's gonna have the same ID, so no change happening here, but unless it's gonna be another change in here. So I'm gonna have, for example, only a username for that. And I'm gonna open up an object. It's gonna be Sequelize dots. So the username is gonna be a string. Let's say I'm gonna give him about 25 characters to represent his username. Well, let's say I don't know, 35 characters. Okay, that seems good. So for allow null, it's gonna be false. We won't be able to allow a null. And also we're gonna add a unique constraint to make sure that each username is actually unique. So there's no 2 users having the same username. We can't actually afford that. And there's a couple of other options actually add in here for each attribute, so you might want to check the documentations for how that works. Also going to add a password, so I'm just going to say pass wd I'm gonna copy most of these, and I'm gonna have a string again. For the password, we're just gonna try to limit it to 20, and unique, of course not. And that pretty much it. So, you know, nothing really exciting about that. Let me just go now generate the migration. So I'm gonna use Sequelize again. I'm gonna do migration create, and I'm gonna put the name of the migration, in this case create users table, and it should actually does the job for us perfectly. Let me just gonna copy this because it's gonna have the same fields, nothing really complicated or anything. So I'm just gonna copy this, go into the create users migration, pasting it again, and let me just go back in here also to copy the schema of this and the whole attribute, so we don't really want to just keep putting them. Remember, the created ads and the updated ads always are in there, so we don't really need to mess up with this, and we just paste our things in there. So yeah, and there we go, it works. And here we can change this to users, and of course here users, and it should work pretty much fine now. So we're just gonna try to run the new migration of users. One other thing I totally forgot about is actually one single or a user has multiple tweets, and a tweet belongs to a single user only. What does that mean is actually we store the user ID, this specific user ID, on every single tweet he actually tweets out. So this is what we need, and we totally forgot about adding this. And each tweet in here has to have, inside of the schema itself, where's the schema? Inside of the actual migration schema, we need to add like a user ID field in here, and in order to make it work. So it's gonna be Sequelize.integer, and it's gonna have, for example, 11 integer, because it's gonna be the actual user ID, and it's gonna be a foreign key that is being put inside of that. Now, simple enough. This is all you need to do. But we already migrated the tweets table, so let me just go roll back this. I'm gonna do Sequelize and dash, it's gonna be database migrate, but we are gonna just undo the last migration. Just this is gonna be undoing the last migration. You can do undo all for undoing all the migrations that has been submitted to the database, but we just want the last one. And I'm gonna run this, so to see, and there we go. You've got yourself actually all the migrations have been gone and nothing left, so pretty much, so it working pretty much fine without any problems. And we can redo the migration now, because you know you have to drop it first, then you can just go in and do it. So I'm gonna do Sequelize db migrates, and now it should work pretty much fine with the user ID inside of it, and it migrates both of them, the users and the tweets. Good enough. Now we've got all of those. Let's go and try to work with the API and try to fetch or put some data. We've got the Bootstrap, and we are gonna just put some fake data for our database inside of the Bootstrap using the Sequelize API. For this one, it's gonna export in, so I'm just gonna do export. It's gonna export an async function, so I'm gonna use the modern async await, and it's gonna just be exporting this particular function, nothing more, nothing less. So first things first, let's just going to try to require both of the models. So the tweet model is going to be require, going to be inside of models actually, and tweets. The other thing it needs is actually the user model, so I'm going to require it again, and models user, and there we go. So both of these are going to be actually the model instances, and we can actually call the methods inside of that, and we can interact with the whole API. So first we create a fake user, then we add some fake tweets to it. So for creating a user, we access the actual model from throughout the user model, and we do create. So this one, what it does is just gonna create the schema using a particular object that we're gonna give it to, the attributes, and it's gonna save it automatically for us. And it's pretty much gonna return a promise for us, a promise that gets resolved with the actual data created. If it works pretty much fine without any problems, or it's gonna throw an error on the catch method, of course, if anything bad happens with an error, of course. So here I'm gonna give it the data that we want. Of course, if we take a look on the user, what we have, the ID is gonna be auto-filled for us, so we don't really have to care about this. We've got username and password. So I'm gonna put a username. It's gonna be, for example, say Alex DMC or something, I don't know, something ridiculous. And for the password, I think I put the password this way, alright? And I'm just gonna put from 9 or from 1 to 0. And there we go. So this is simply how you create things. And as I've said, this is gonna return a promise for you, so you need to catch the promise. So I'm gonna say error, and if there's any errors, or pretty much let's gonna try to create an error handler first, like a custom or a generic error handler for all. So error handler, and it's gonna be taking an error, and all it does is just do console.error, and it says error, just passing the error again. Simple enough, nothing really complicated. And on the catch, we can just pass the reference to this handler, and it should work pretty much fine. In this case, since I've marked this asynchronous, I want to use await. If you don't really want to use await, you can go ahead and use the send function, and you can receive the data, like you can receive data in here that has been saved to the database, and you can work with it normally. But I really like working with async and await for just making it look like a little bit syntactical sugar, and Node.js supports it now, so it's pretty great. So I'm gonna put await in here, and it's gonna return like the actual user instance. So yeah, there we go. Simple enough. Now let's try to add as well a tweet. So I'm gonna do tweet equals await for creating a new tweet throughout the module, and it's gonna be pretty much the same thing. So for the tweet, what we've got just a constant to be filled in. So it's gonna be a constant, and here I don't know. This is actually the tweet content, and let's try to add like tweeted from iPhone. That's pretty ridiculous. Anyway, so we just added the content in here, and remember, each tweet has a relation to the user, so each tweet has to be keeping track of the actual user ID. So remember that we need to, every time assign or create a tweet, we give it which user has created this tweet, which is throughout the ID itself. So I'm gonna do a user ID, and we give it the user ID throughout the model. We access the ID. So pretty much how you do it is actually, you can imagine this as a normal object that has attributes inside of it, username attribute, a password attribute, and of course the ID that's automatically filled for us. So we can, throughout this object, access this ID or any other attributes pretty much. You can also use the get method and like do get and get whatever attributes you throw the name in here, but I really prefer just using it as a normal object notation in here. Simple enough. Of course you need to catch this if there's any errors or something, and we can pass in the error handler. So yeah, there we go. And for the username in here is going to be unique. So if you try to like assign this or create two instances of the same username and save it to the database, you're definitely going to get an error, and this error handler going to be executed for us. So yeah, we just need to make sure that we run our application only once, just for having a clean code and stuff, or a clean output. There we go. I've got a tweet in here, and everything should pretty much work fine. So this tweet is being linked to this user, and this is how you can pretty much go ahead and actually link to tweets using associations. But nevertheless, we've created that. We've created the user, we've created the tweet, but we haven't associated them yet. So after creating the models and stuff, you need to always associate both of the models that has relations between them. So since any user has multiple tweets and a single tweet has only one single user, so we need to assign or let Sequelize know about this association throughout the model. So we say user has many. So this method actually is predefined for you. You give it which target that has many, and of course it has many tweets. You give it the model instance in here, and the second object, it takes some options that you can put, which are pretty great. So it takes like an as object or an as option. So what are gonna be the name inside of this actual user? So when we put it inside of the tweet, they're gonna be tweets. So I'm gonna put it like this, and let me just gonna put this as in capital letter, and gonna be a foreign key. So, and what I mean by the foreign key is the user key gonna be put it inside of the tweet. So what are the name of the column name that's going to be put it inside of that model, and of course we're going to be naming it a user ID as we've created that in here, and also we created inside of the migrations schema. So this is what we want to call it. On the other hand, we also need to link it from the tweet itself. So we need to do a tweet belongs to. Now, since a tweet has one single user only, so we need to do a belongs to relation or association, and we give it where it belongs to the user. Some options as well, like the as, and as actually is completely optional, so you can get rid of it, as well as the foreign key. So it's automatically going to assign the foreign key by joining the name of the model plus its actual user or primary key name, which is ID in this case. So this is how it pretty much works. So they are optional, but it's better to add them for better understanding of the schema. And here I'm gonna add like user, and the foreign key is gonna pretty much be the same thing, because it's actually one-to-many relationship. It's not many-to-many or one-to-one, it's one-to-many relationship. And that's how you actually assign. Why, some of you might ask why we don't really do just one single association, why do like both ways association? Simply because if we try to access from the tweet and we actually grab all the users, we will be able to, as well as on the other side, if we try from the user to grab all the tweets belonging to this particular user, we also be able to do so. So yeah, that's pretty much how it works. And there we go. Now we've got the user, we've got the tweet created for us and stuff. Now how we can go ahead and fetch some data from the database. So really simple actually, since we've created the user and created the tweet, and both are now associated throughout the user IDs, clearly seen here throughout now the tweet model. So let's say we want to grab all the tweets belonging to a specific user, or better say, let's try to like use the user model and grab every tweet that belongs to this particular user. So I'm gonna do user.find all, and here it takes an object to filter the user, like which user it finds, and it's gonna find every single user that has this condition in here, the object condition with the attributes. Of course, since we have got a unique username, so it's gonna only find us a single user that with this particular username. So it's gonna put before this I need to put where, so username equals Alex DMC, and here it's gonna find us this, and we are gonna include our association. So we're gonna include this foreign model to it. So this includes actually an array. If you have like multiple attributes and stuff, you can include, like, I don't know, if you have multiple associations with a tweet, with a portfolio, with an options tag, or with another things actually on a Twitter happens, you can just add all the associations in here in order to be able to eagerly load them. So this is what eagerly loading pretty much is, or in other words, they can also call it as populating from the database. So here I'm gonna add an object who's gonna represent this. I'm gonna add the model, so it's gonna be the tweet model, this one. This is what we need, and we need to add the as. So that's why we add the as option in here, or the as attribute, in order to later on when we eagerly load them using the include, so we can easily just specify this name and it's gonna grab it for us. So here we need to specify the same name, so it's gonna be tweets. Make sure to do so with the same name here, and everything gonna work pretty much fine. Now what it tries to do is finds the user with this username, the Alex DMC. Once it finds it, it goes using this include, it goes and it finds us all the tweets related to that particular user, and of course it's gonna grab this all the tweets that is related to the user, because we told it throughout this include model, and it's gonna put it all inside a single object for us and give it back to us. And of course we need to catch this too, so I'm gonna just put a handler, and nonetheless I'm also gonna be able pretty much to use await in here, because it's a promise, and it's gonna promise to give us all the data inside of that. It's gonna be an array of data, or pretty much an array of users. So I'm gonna have this in here. Simple enough. If we try to fetch from the tweet, fetch all the user or the single user that he has, you're gonna do pretty much the same thing. Find all, with some condition to that tweet, and you can include the mode of user instead of the tweet in here, and you give it the as relation like the user in here, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, it's not really that much of complicated or anything. And yeah, so now let's go and do like console.log Alex DMC tweets, and it's gonna grab us this. So I'm just gonna do, so it's gonna just with all the users with their tweets, gonna be console logs for us in here really quick. I'm just gonna save this. So hopefully now we also need to go to the app.js and run that too. So after requiring the connection, make sure to do so. After requiring the connection, I'm gonna also go ahead and require src bootstrap, and just the bootstrap, and it takes a function, so we need to execute this, and there we go. So this is all you need to do. So I'm gonna run that again one more time, and there we go. Now it actually works pretty much fine. It pretty much just gives you some verbose information about what's happening behind the scenes on Sequelize. So like inserting into tweets, what are the data being inserted, just like shows you the query, the low-level query of MySQL or the actual SQL queries. And in here we've got our tweets. So we've got Alex DMC tweets. There we go. I've got an array, and it gives you like the ID, username, the password, and created ad and timestamps, like updated ads. And lastly, we've got our tweets using the eager layout that we have created. Of course, we've got an ID, contents, whatever tweet that we have got in here, like tweeted from iPhone, and of course other attributes like the updated and created ads, and most likely the user ID, which links us to pretty much this user. So this is how eager layouting works, and how you can include one model to another really easily to speed up the work in progress and get or fetch data really quickly without any problems and hassles, and putting a lot of code together to get this kind of things. So that was like pretty much actually, guys, just trying to explain basics things, really basic, because Sequelize is just like a huge framework, and I gave this video to just explain it to you guys really quick. So hopefully you guys, you've enjoyed it. Make sure to check out the documentation, because a lot of things I'm not saying in this particular video simply because I don't have that much of time to do so. So again, thank you guys for watching. I really hope you guys have enjoyed. Push that like button if you really liked it, if you really want more videos like this to learn like single framework or something, or master it in a single video. And I will see you hopefully in the next one.